I think that jiu-jitsu is a philosophy that's expressed physically, and that it's the kind of development of the mental capacity and physical capacity working in unison to move efficiently and almost flowingly, unresistingly, with a given situation, with a physically resisting opponent. Learning how to generate force on your own and how to steal force from the floor, how to steal force from the other person, and move in concert with it as opposed to clash against, which if you watch two untrained people fight, it's almost entirely a clash. It's a runaway and clash, a runaway and clash. If you watch jiu-jitsu done well, it looks like water moving around a solid structure. I think that a lot of times, like the clashing that we see going on and working well is just the fact that, you get very, very physically powerful people every now and then they're able to get away with this. But I don't think that that's fantastic, because ultimately it's a results-driven thing. But I think that the essence of the martial arts is learning how to make more out of less and how to move with and be yielding, almost like real-life Aikido. I think you flow until the point at which you are the greater force, at which point in time you can apply. But if you look at the best throughout the course of history in boxing, in wrestling, in judo, they're magical. They disappear and reappear. It's like fighting a ghost that when you don't want to find it, it finds you. And I think that we see that in the Buvaisar societies of wrestling. And I guess you could look at Floyd Mayweather or Willie Pep, or Pernell Whitaker in boxing as brilliant examples of disappearing and reappearing. And when you're strong, it's almost like guerrilla warfare. When you're strong, I'm nowhere to be found. When you're weak, you can't get rid of me. And I think that's what we're looking for. To use Bruce Lee, which is a little trite, but again, he's brilliant. It's like water can flow or water can crash, and they would crash when they needed to crash, and they would flow when they needed to flow, but they would flow for the purpose of dissipating and then crash when they would win, and at the right moment, then go back to flowing the second that the other person found them. And it's beautiful to watch. It's artistic. And I think that great expression of anything physical is ultimately studied as a science, but expressed as an art. And I think that that's something that gets lost in jiu-jitsu a lot of times when it gets a little nerdy, like do this, hand here, like the more details I have, the better, when in reality that's just not in my experience how it's done. I would just say that you have your arms bend in various ways. You have key lock Americana, straight arm locks, Kimura omoplata. They create leverage, they create control, they create shapes that I can affect and that can affect me, and they can be affected through other forces and other objects or structures like the ground or the wall. I really enjoy mixed martial arts because there's another component rather than just me and you and the floor. There's me, you, the floor, and the wall, and it's another player in the game that doesn't exist in a grappling context within in a non-enclosed, I guess, area of combat. You can strangle me or choke me without my arms being involved, or you can use one of my shoulders to pin one side of one carotid artery off, and you can enclose the other. You can turn my knee in the exact same ways that you can turn my arm. You can add a rotation to that, or it can be directly linear against the joint. So I guess what I would say is the more that I've been able to understand jiu-jitsu, the more that it's given me a look into how we learn language, where rather than learning 5 bazillion adjectives, I understand what an adjective is. And of course, we are all read into some degree of vocabulary. And I understand what an adverb is. I know what a noun is. I know what the component parts of a sentence are. I know what, I guess a clause, a contraction, any of these things. And it allows you to be interesting and artistic with your language to the extent that you can. But I can't, I can speak a degree of Spanish, but I'm not even slightly artistic in Spanish. I would be something, I speak like a child with a head injury. The way that I perceive the world is affected deeply by the language that I learned. Again, if I learn, I have no idea how the Chinese language structures, but I can only imagine that it would affect, it's like a different lens. We're all looking at the same thing, but I have a different set of sunglasses on than you do. That's very, very interesting. I'll use the Quran as an example. Apparently it's unbelievably poetic and in Arabic. It's still neat and was interesting reading in English, but I'm told by people that I trust that it just one doesn't bear a resemblance to the other. And I think that's a very interesting thing, that you may be able to say the same thing, but in a more, I guess in a different way, in a more artistic way that may not translate on a one-for-one kind of fidelity. The more that we're able to understand about how the body works, the more examples of the body working this way, the body working that way, the body working that way, the more that I'm able to eventually become an artist. But it has to be studied as a science first, and it does start with technique collection, vocabulary collection, the same way we learn in school, where you remember how to say quickly 17 different ways. And let's say I speak Spanish, I only know 3. So you might use an adjective like quickly in Spanish, but use one of the many options to describe that I don't understand. And now I sit there and go like, wait, what? I can't be artistic. I can't be as organic with the language as I'd like. So I believe that jiu-jitsu a lot of times starts with the acquisition of a lot of, hey, do this drill, this technique. Here's an Americana to an arm lock to a triangle. But the problem with that is oftentimes we get stuck in that phase. People eventually become move collectors or sequence collectors. And I noticed this when I'm trying to do DVDs, or I guess like an instructional series now, or even teaching in class. I don't believe in that form of learning anymore. Not that it's not valuable, but I don't understand jiu-jitsu on that level anymore. So what I'm trying to do is get across the basic ideas to people and say, hey, you need to fill in the gaps with going to class all the time. You need to go, hey, learn this move, learn that technique, because otherwise I'm basically just throwing at you like 75 different words that you could use, but that hasn't really taught you how to speak a language. Whereas if you give me the language structure, you can fill in these pieces on your own and then eventually speak organically, which will be ultimately unique to you, because otherwise you just end up being like a weird facsimile of whatever it is that I'm doing for mostly the worst, I'd say. It's a discovery process, and no one can cheat that process.